I mentioned this in our Red Wings trade video from earlier today, but earlier yesterday on May 31st, there was a gathering in front of the Vancouver Art Gallery. Because this is a Vancouver Canucks related video, I think I could bring this up and actually have people relate to it. And I just want to say that that stuff is amazing. Sure, the social distancing is kind of irrelevant now, but at the same time, getting people together to stand up for one cause that speaks for equality all around and promotes the idea of everybody being able to live a safe and worry-free life, especially in the way that Vancouverites did it, with no reported cases of looting, smashing windows, or any of that violent stuff that we don't need to see in these kinds of situations. This is the brink of change right here in society, folks, and I think Vancouverites yesterday did a very good job in showing that off. Now, full disclaimer, I wasn't there because I'm still coughing a lot, and I could potentially have some disease that probably should not be said because I don't want to jinx anything, but today I wanted to talk about the Vancouver Canucks and a first-round pick. Now, I said a first-round pick, and not their first-round pick or the first-round pick or whatever, because the first-round pick that the Vancouver Canucks own for 2020 is something that we've already discussed on the channel with my own personal opinions that was then later verified and confirmed by the NHL. It's still up in the air. The Canucks still currently own their first-round pick in 2020, but if they beat the Minnesota Wild in a best 3 out of 5 play-in series, then that first-round pick in 2020 goes to the New Jersey Devils, and instead the Canucks are just going to be left with nothing in the first 2 rounds. Remember, their second-round pick this year was traded in the Tyler Madden-Tyler Toffoli trade. So the way the Canucks are right now, they do have a first, they don't have a second, they do have a third. But a lot of Canucks fans are very confident in their team when it comes to the idea of them playing against the Minnesota Wild. Now, this is nice. It's nice to see Canucks fans being positive about their team. In my playoff preview, or not playoff preview, my play-in series preview video that I made about the Canucks and the Wild, I did say that, hey, the Wild have beat the Canucks twice in this season, and the Canucks have only defeated the Wild once. The Wild play a very boring, defensively paced style of hockey that for some reason seems to work against Vancouver. So I'm not going to be all up in arms and saying that the Canucks are going to absolutely sweep the Wild. Of course it is possible, but I don't want to say anything with 100% conviction, don't I? But the way things are right now, people are saying that the Vancouver Canucks are most likely going to win, and that's, that's okay. But what that means is that the Vancouver Canucks would indeed lose their first-round pick this year, which is what this video centers around, a first-round selection in the 2020 draft. I wanted to take you back to August of 2019, and a video that I made while I was in Japan. I was standing outside of an arcade karaoke place in Minamisuna in Tokyo, and I took my phone out and started recording a vlog about the Vancouver Canucks because there were some very interesting Jim Benning quotes that I wanted to take a look at when he was on Sportsnet 650 on August, I think it was 20th or whatever. Take a look at this. Jim Benning spoke back in August about trading a first-round pick for JT Miller. There's a chance at the trade deadline that we may move a player to recoup that first-round pick. I don't like trading first-round picks. I've never done it before, but we had to make the move to make our team better. Now, that was something that I brought up all the way back in August, and I said, yeah, it's great that Jim Benning wants to get this team a first-round pick again. It's great that he's looking towards the draft and wanting to give our team the opportunity to choose somebody in that top 31. But the main point that I made in that video as I was sweatfully standing outside in the rain in Tokyo was that, I didn't really think the Canucks had much to trade for in order to get a first-round pick. Because I had a problem with the way Benning phrased this, saying that, okay, at the trade deadline, we're going to trade some players to get a first back. We could do that, we might. And I was thinking to myself, okay, if the Canucks are in a position where at the trade deadline, which is in February of 2020, a few months before the playoffs starts, if they're in February and they're in a position to trade away a player for a first, Would that not mean that the Vancouver Canucks just ultimately failed in their experiment to become a playoff team this season? How would you trade a first-round pick for JT Miller in the offseason, then, a few months down the line, trade another roster player who, in theory, should be helping your team make the playoffs for a first-round pick back? How are you going to do that at the trade deadline when you've spent this entire offseason and summer building towards the playoffs with this rhetoric that this team is a playoff team and we want to make the playoffs, and it's been far too long without the playoffs that this is the year for that to change? And so I questioned the logic here, where Jim Benning opened up the possibility of the team willingly taking away roster players and getting first-round draft picks in return. And one of the main concerns that I brought up with this idea was, okay, well, who the hell are you going to trade to get a first-round pick? A roster player that can make your team good now that you can get a first-round pick out of. Who the heck is that? And if a player like that exists on the Vancouver Canucks that you're willing to trade, does that not signify that this team is not good enough to make the playoffs when that's been the rhetoric that you've been saying this entire time? It didn't make sense to me then. It sure as heck doesn't make sense to me now. But now we're past the trade deadline. We're in a position where the other 7 teams who aren't in the play-in series, they're allowed to start trading. And who knows, as teams start losing their play-in series, maybe they will start to be able to trade too. I don't know anything about that. That's just me spitting off the top of my head. We also do not know anything about the Stanley Cup playoffs, when the Stanley Cup is going to be awarded, and when the NHL Draft itself is going to be. Which, in my opinion, opens the door up for Jim Benning to actually go out there and recuperate that first. Who knows? Maybe the Stanley Cup gets awarded in September and the draft is in October. Once the draft happens, does Jim Benning go out there and take on his word again and say, hey, we want to get a first-round pick back? If the Vancouver Canucks win their series against the Wild and they lose their 2020 first, does the possibility exist where Jim Benning says, we want to get a first-round pick for this season, we're going to make a trade to do that? Sure, if the Vancouver Canucks lose to the Wild and they keep their first-round pick for 2020, then that's a different story. Maybe this entire discussion is completely useless. But because everybody is talking about the Canucks as if they're going to win and lose that first-round pick, I thought it would have been necessary to bring it up, because it was brought up a year ago in August. It was something that Jim Benning said that he doesn't like to do and that he's never done before with the Vancouver Canucks, trading away a first. And that's true. Jim Benning has only been a part of 2 trades that have involved a first-round pick with the Vancouver Canucks. The first one was the Ryan Kesler trade, where the Canucks acquired a first. The second one was the JT Miller trade, where the Canucks traded a first. Jim Benning has been allergic to first-round picks this entire time when being a Vancouver Canucks GM. It's been 6 years since this team has acquired another first. So, whether or not the Canucks lose the play-in series and keep their 2020 first, or if they win the play-in series and lose their 2020 first, I want to see this team make a splash and trade something, anything, for a first-round pick. And that anything includes anything above the age of 27. Since Benning was so adamant back in August that he wanted to do that, hey, let's see it happen. But again, I'm only being this confrontational and this direct about it because of the same issue that brought itself up back when I was standing in a Tokyo arcade all the way back in August. What the heck are the Vancouver Canucks going to trade to get a first-round pick back? There's no trade that they can make that would make the fans happy that they're getting a first-round pick back. Because who on this team is worth a first? You got JT Miller, he's worth a first for sure. You got Elias Pettersson, you got Bo Horvat, you got Besser, you got maybe Tanner Pearson. And you bet this fan base is going to explode if you trade any of those guys. Who else is worth a first? The prospects, Podkolzin, and all the other really nice guys they have there. You could say that a guy like Juolevi isn't even worth a first anymore. So this idea that Benning had back in August didn't make sense back then, and I'm still kind of scratching my head about it. Maybe Jim Benning completely goes against his word and disregards this idea and says, okay, that's something I said back in August, that's not the direction of the team now, which, okay, sure, you can say that, but devil's advocate, where the heck is your long-term planning if that's the case? So, overall, I would like to see the Vancouver Canucks get a first-round pick back for this draft. I would not like to see them lose against the Wild, but at the same time, there are many really good players on this team that would be worth a first. It's just, I don't think there's any benefit in letting these guys go for a first-round pick that will most likely affect the team a few years down the line once that player actually makes the team or whatever. So it's a weird discussion here for sure, but it's one that I thought was important enough to talk about. So that's why I brought it up here in this video today. If you have any comments about the first-round pick, the draft, the Vancouver Canucks, and the trades, leave them all in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. So that's Roll9, and bye.